Marianne and Nicholas have been together since college. At that time, the girl was being courted by two young men at once, Nicholas and his friend Jared. Both were trying to take care of Marianne. In the end, she chose Nicholas. He was more serious and diligent, while Jared, although charismatic, thought about completely frivolous things. The girl was already thinking about the future and wanted a serious relationship, and everything developed quite quickly for them. They got married on the fly, as they say. Recently, their daughter Mary turned 7 years old. For the first few years of their life together, things were smooth, peaceful even. But gradually, cracks began to show. His wife started snapping more often, throwing little jabs that stung deeper than she probably realized. More and more, she drew comparisons between him and the husbands of her friends, the ones who were still child-free and seemingly living the dream. She was sick and tired of hearing how those men pampered their wives with lavish gifts, spontaneous getaways to the coast, and all that jazz. Her own life felt like it had dulled into grayscale. Work, chores, tutoring their kid, a cramped apartment, a dead-end job. Same old, same old. The spark was gone, and the grind was wearing her down. Then one evening, she launched into another one of her monologues, accusing him of being stuck in place, of going nowhere with his career. Again, she dragged in the success stories of her friends' husbands, how they were launching businesses and raking in cash. Nicholas had had it. Her relentless criticism had worn him thin. That night, it blew up into a full-blown argument, loud, ugly, and long overdue. A few days later, still reeling from that fight, Nicholas sat at his desk when his phone buzzed. It was Jared, an old university buddy. They still kept in touch, just not often. "Nick, man, it's been ages. How are you?" Jared's upbeat voice crackled through the line. They chatted for a bit, the usual catching up, and then Jared got to the point. "Listen, next Friday's my birthday. I'm throwing a party. You and Marianne should totally come. It's gonna be packed, and trust me, you don't want to miss the fun." Without hesitation, Nicholas said yes. He was already smiling at the thought. A night out with his wife might be exactly what they needed. They barely ever went anywhere together. Maybe that was part of the problem. When he got home and told Marianne about the invite, she surprised him by lighting up instantly. All the tension seemed to melt off her shoulders. She agreed on the spot. Nicholas exhaled, relieved. Maybe she just needed a break from the routine, he thought. They arranged for their daughter to stay with her grandparents for the night, and on Friday evening, they headed over to Jared's place. The apartment was impressive, big, modern, and stylish, with a sprawling living room where guests laughed around a long, festive table. A few familiar faces from their college days were already there. Everyone greeted Jared, toasted his birthday, and asked about his career. And clearly, Jared was killing it. Whatever he was doing, it was working. Nicholas quickly slipped into the lively atmosphere, catching up with old friends. Marianne, though, zeroed in on the birthday boy. She was all ears, hanging on his every word, practically glowing as she listened to how well things had turned out for her ex. The drinks kept flowing, way more than Nicholas was used to. The other guests kept topping him off, and before long, he was well past tipsy. Not wanting to make a scene, he quietly ducked into another room and crashed on a couch, hoping a quick nap would help him sober up. Back at the party, Marianne was still deep in conversation with Jared. The more he talked, the more fascinated she became. He painted a picture of a completely different life, one full of success, freedom, and excitement. At one point, she leaned in, her voice soft and thoughtful. "You know," she said, eyes locking onto his, "I still don't get why things between us didn't work out back then." The look she gave him said more than words ever could. The drinks had been flowing all night, and Jared, well, he took her words at face value. No second guesses, no hesitation. Quietly, without drawing attention, he led her to his bedroom. old sparks reignited. One kiss led to another, and Marianne didn't flinch. No guilt, no hesitation. In her mind, she was already living that dreamy life Jared had just described, full of color and promise, nothing like her own muted existence. Meanwhile, laughter and music echoed from the living room, masking everything. In the thick of that celebration, Marianne crossed a line she never thought she would. For the first time, she cheated on her husband and with his friend. No less. Sometime later, Nicholas woke up to the sound of loud voices and laughter. Groggy, with a dull ache throbbing behind his eyes, he checked the time and figured they should start heading home. He wandered back into the main room, and there she was, his wife, sitting quietly, glass in hand, staring blankly into space like she'd slipped out of the room in her mind. At first, he didn't think much of it. He'd just woken up and wasn't exactly firing on all cylinders himself. Plus, the pounding in his head wasn't helping. They said their goodbyes, waved to the remaining guests, called a cab, and left. Nicholas all but collapsed into bed the moment they got home, out cold before his head even hit the pillow. But Marianne, she stayed up. She sat alone in the kitchen, long after the lights went out. Lost in thoughts she couldn't shake. Weeks passed. The atmosphere in the house turned heavy, like a storm that wouldn't break. Marianne barely spoke to Nicholas. She was always out, meeting friends, and when she was home, she drifted through the days with a strange detachment. Eventually, Nicholas couldn't ignore it anymore. The silence, the distance, it was eating him alive. One night, he stopped her in the hallway, unable to hold it in any longer. "What's going on, Marianne?" he asked, his voice low but firm. "Something's changed." Just Tay. And that was it. The dam broke. Marianne didn't hold back. All the resentment she had been bottling up came pouring out. Complaints about their life, their home, the routines, the feeling of being stuck. And then came the blow that knocked the wind out of him. She didn't find him attractive anymore. Nicholas tried to laugh it off, half joking, trying to lighten the moment. "So who does attract you then?" he asked, forcing a smile. She looked him dead in the eye. Jared. That one word hit like a freight train. Everything shifted in that instant. Marianne calmly declared that she was done. Done with the life they'd built. Done with the man who had once meant everything to her. She wanted something new, a different life with Jared. Nicholas barely managed to keep himself composed. Their daughter, little Mary, was fast asleep in the next room. He didn't raise his voice. He couldn't. Not now. "And what about Mary?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Marianne shrugged, cold and distant. "We'll figure that out later." And just like that, she turned to start packing. Later that night, Nicholas couldn't hold it in any longer. He picked up his phone and called Jared, the so-called friend who had betrayed him. He wanted a face-to-face conversation, man to man. But the moment Jared got wind of what was coming, he ghosted him completely. No calls back, no explanation, just silence. So, Nicholas filed for divorce. Throughout the entire process, Marianne barely showed her face. She visited Mary only once. A quick, awkward meeting that felt more like obligation than love. She didn't fight for custody, didn't ask for shared parenting, nothing. Maybe Jared didn't want a kid around. Maybe Marianne thought motherhood was optional in her shiny new life. Either way, Nicholas made his choice. He wasn't going to let strangers or a disinterested mother raise his daughter. From that point on, he stepped into the role of a full-time single. Telling Mary the truth was one of the hardest things he'd ever done. How do you explain abandonment to a child? He fumbled through it as gently as he could. But kids are smarter than we think. Over time, she started piecing it together on her own. Meanwhile, Marianne dove headfirst into her new life with Jared. She thought she'd found her happily ever after. The excitement, the freedom, the man who made her heart race. But the glow didn't last. Turned out Jared wasn't cut out for commitment. He liked his independence, his no-strings-attached lifestyle. Bills, routines, emotional responsibility, none of it appealed to him. Within half a year, cracks started showing. And just like that, Marianne began to look backward. Suddenly, Nicholas, once the man she'd called boring and stuck, didn't seem so bad. The stability she'd once mocked became something she missed. That's when the messages started coming in. At first, it was just about Mary, but soon she began slipping in little hints. Wouldn't it be nice if we all went somewhere together, like a family? You should talk to your dad about it, she'd say to Mary. Maybe we should grab dinner sometime, the three of us, she'd suggest, like nothing had happened. One evening, after Mary had gone to her room and the two of them were left alone at the table, Nicholas finally spoke up. Calm, measured, clear. You're always welcome to see Mary, but don't confuse that with getting involved in my life again. His tone didn't leave room for debate. The door to their past was shut, locked. In chasing some temporary thrill, Marianne had walked away from the life that had been hers, the man, the home, the child. But those kinds of impulsive choices rarely come with fairy tale endings. And the damage done, it doesn't disappear just because you regret it later. In the end, life has a way of circling back. You plant the seeds, good or bad, and eventually you live the harvest. That's the tough lesson.